So let's look closely together at Kiddushin Daf Lamed Tet Amud Bet. Of course, we can also engage that text together with David Hartman in the chapter on rabbinic responses to suffering. Our Mishna, everyone who does one commandment, good is caused, good occurs for him, and long life comes about for him, or her, of course, and he or she inherits the land. While all who do not perform one commandment, good does not occur for him or her, and long life does not come about for him, and he does not inherit the land. This is our Mishnah. Now, this language, this language, Ma'arichin lo yamar v'nochel ha'aretz, only appears twice in relation to two commandments in the Torah. It's the only two commandments in the Torah concerning which the consequence of observing that commandment is explicitly expressed, mentioned. And those two commandments are Kibud Av Ve'em and the so-called Shiluach Haken, the sending away of the nest, as the idiom. But of course, that's for sending away the mother bird if you need to take for food the gozalot, the baby birds in the nest. Now, of course, there are many commandments, especially in Parshat V'chi Tetzei, L'Milchama, when you go out to war, and of course, Sefer Devarim. There are a number of commandments, especially there, but also elsewhere, where either the language or certainly the idea is dependent, is conditional. In other words, V'chi Tetzei L'Milchama, when you go to war, is saying, when you are engaged in war, and you see a beautiful woman of the enemy, and you want to engage her, more in the literal sense of engage. The romantic, though, I don't know how much romance is involved in men at war who see a beautiful woman or a susceptible woman of the enemy. The commandment there is not saying, when you go to war, make sure you find, if you want to fulfill all the commandments, so here's one, make sure you find a beautiful woman and just go about engaging her. If you're going to do that, of course here engaging doesn't really mean engaging, though it does. In other words, the reality of some or many men at war, for a number of reasons, it isn't too difficult to surmise, to make clear, get specific about. It's not saying when you're men at war, this is what you should do. You should find a beautiful woman, and you want to have sexual relations with her. This is what you should do. You have to marry the woman. You have to engage and enter into Kiddushin with the woman. Of course, then the whole question of she's the enemy, the non-Israelite. How does that work? So it's complicated, as almost anything in the Talmud. And if it isn't complicated, the Talmud will complicate it. Will show us that, will argue that what seems to be not complicated really is, when you try to really understand it in its details, in its specifics, and apply it. In a sense, this is what this whole course of study is suggesting, is arguing to us. We remember this cartoon, yes? And then a miracle appears on the blackboard of all of this algebraic or calculus notations. I think you should be more explicit here in step 2. What do you mean by a miracle? This is one of the key problems that this course, that this professing professor is suggesting, is inviting you to consider, that this is one of the major problems, crises, challenges in Jewish education. But it's not just Jewish education, it's in all education. Teaching mathematics, teaching Shakespeare, social studies, English, language and literature, it doesn't matter. Far too often, as best I can see, and many who look into the matter more than I do in specific schools, specific school systems, in specific states of the United States and in the whole country, and in other countries as well. I think what we find is that by far most teachers really don't get explicit, don't get awfully specific about if they're going to teach Romeo and Juliet, about what tragedy is in Shakespeare or beyond Shakespeare, what love is, what youth is, and what violence is between persons and groups of persons, etc. We have very vague senses of what democracy is, or justice is, or as I say, if we're teaching Shakespeare, what tragedy is, or comedy is, or what are really the issues, psychological and philosophic, some of them that are raised, that are evoked and provoked, that we can plausibly discern, encounter in Shakespeare's plays. And then, of course, the specific play where a Shakespeare teacher would be about to teach, choose to teach, or even someone else's chooses the curriculum. In Jewish education, of course, everything that we've been trying to engage. What do we mean by God, by commandment, by Messiah, by Shabbat, by Purim, chapter 1 of Joshua, etc. Don't agree with me, at least not fully. That's not what I'm arguing in this course. In fact, I'm arguing the opposite. Yes? I'm arguing it won't work for you if you take these packet of clues we've looked at on Jonah, or any other curriculum that I've been sharing with you. It won't work for you if you take that. Because I love Zelda, the Israeli poetess Zelda, the poem, the end of one of her poems I brought in the Jonah packets. And all of us who are drowning, pray for us, Jonah, because you know what it's like to be drowning. Again, not literally. Literally in the sense of really in life, but it's not drowning in water. It's up to our nostrils in life crises that put us in question, even to a small, medium, and to a terrible degree. And then we're drowning. So this is what the Gemara is going to do. So let's go back to the Gemara. First the Mishnah. Again, only 2 commandments. Shiluach haken, sending away the mother bird. And so I was saying, yes, there's a commandment that it's not saying go out there and find a nest of birds, just like the Eshet Yifad Toar in a time of war. It's saying if you're going to do this, you ought not to do this. But if you're going to, given the reality of men in war, some or many men in war, this is how you have to do it. I remember years ago when I lived here, this little kind of supplement to a newspaper, a little magazine, a newspaper thing for Shabbat at the end of the week, called Kol Ha'ir, and I think it's in different cities, at least Tel Aviv, as well as Jerusalem. It started out in Jerusalem. It's a terrible thing, at least the way it was years ago. I haven't seen it since then. After a while, I just refused it. It was for free then. I'm told now that you have to pay something for it. But in other words, why pay for something or even take it for free? Because there's all this horrible stuff going. It's reporting, as I suppose most of what's in the newspaper. But there's also theater and the book section and the art section, etc. in the newspaper. But here in Kol Ha'ir, at least as I say, it used to be, what you have is just these terrible things happening. Small, medium, and large, terrible. And one time they reported that there was a group of so-called Haredi Jews. I say Haredi fellow Jews. I say so-called because those who are the so-called ultra-Orthodox, it's translated, or even literally those who fear, revere the divine, the reality we call God. I mean, what does it mean, ultra-Orthodox? I mean, anybody who's Orthodox, also so-called modern Orthodox, keeps the Shabbat, in the same way. To the same degree, everything. The way you prepare tea, or, vis-a-vis Eruv. If there's no Eruv, you don't carry a paperclip or a Kleenex or whatever. So there's no real differences there. The differences are more sociological in the person's dress. Though again, for men, talit katan, also modern Orthodox is wearing talit katan. But there are a few halachot, I suppose, which maybe in dinim are adopted, but for the most part, it's identical. What's different again is certain sociological, ideological, so-called certain notions vis-a-vis non-Jewish culture, I suppose. Though again, not everybody. Right this morning on our classical music station in Israel, there was a call-in kind of part of it, and program they have, and somebody called in from Bnei Brak, and they asked him. He says, "Yes, I'm what they call, dati Haredi." But he says, "I listen day and night. I love classical music, and I listen day and night to the classical, music station." So that community or communities, that approach isn't monolithic either. Nothing really is when you look at it more carefully, any kind of collective or group that we have a label for. So I was reminded that, so they told about a group of Haredi Jews who decided there's certain commandments which we really don't tend to observe, and it would be a lovely thing if we would take them up and really observe them. And one of them they adopted was Shiluach HaKen, so they went around Jerusalem and finding baby birds and shooing away the mother bird and taking the baby birds. They didn't need them for food or anything. They just felt that why don't we take up this mitzvah which is muznach, which is forsaken, which is not taken up. Well, Hello, I mean, Shiluach Haken is one of these commandments. It's not saying go out and, shoo away mother birds and take the gross load. It's saying if you're in a situation where you need to for food, then this is how you should do it. And then, of course, there's a difference of opinion in the Gemara, not in our Gemara here in Kiddushin, but there's a difference of opinion about Tarmei mitzvot, the reasons interpreting what's behind this commandment. Of course, one is compassion for all of God's creatures, and so compassion for the mother bird's distress if she was to see someone taking away, obviously, her baby birds. But then, of course, another view is no. That's not the right way to understand the commandments. The reason to do it is because, like all of the commandments, there's a gzeirah. It's a decree. It's a commandment. You're commanded, so you do it. But, what the real reason or reasons are, if there are any beyond the commandment, that's not for us to know. So, of course, there's a difference of opinion on almost everything. Excuse me, today's one of our, I guess it's our first Shara of heat wave with the desert air, that it surrounds 2 or 3, is it, sides around Jerusalem, here we're up in a mountain, but yes, desert on 2 or 3 of the sides, so I'm very parched today, so I'm going to, I might be drinking a little water at times. Now, yeah, so anyway, this is all b'sograim in parentheses. But these 2 commandments, the only one, kibud avim v'shiluach haken, the only ones where it's explicitly stated, yes, what the consequence, so-called reward, involves. That even that there is one. I mean, we don't know. Is there one? Is there such a consequence, a positive consequence or negative consequence for the other commandments? It's really kind of left unclear. Though I suppose, more than I suppose, there are verses that would say that in general, the life of the command Torah and Torah and mitzvot would tend to lead to positive consequences or negative, though notice I say tend to. I mean, there are different views on this. Of course, Pirkei Avot, there's the Mishna that schar mitzvah, and this is the view of Nefesh HaChaim, the author of Nefesh HaChaim, Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin. Even Olam Haba, Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin says, it's not the next world, it's not another world, it's the consciousness that a person who lives the life of Torah and mitzvot for its own sake, not because of anything positive or negative that might come about by their observance. Such a person is a ben olam haba now. In other words, in their consciousness, they're walking around. They're in this world, but not of it, as Herman Melville, puts it. So, all right. Let's look at our Gemara, and we'll take a break for a minute, and we'll continue with the Gemara in a second video. Thanks for being with me. Continue with me, yes, in this next video.